I never wanted to join a fraternity. The whole concept seemed ridiculous to me, paying for friendship and social status while subjecting yourself to humiliation. But when my roommate Jake convinced me to attend Alpha Sigma Phi's Rush Week events, I figured it couldn't hurt. The century-old Victorian mansion that housed the fraternity stood imposing against the autumn sky, its weathered brick facade and Gothic windows a stark contrast to the modern university buildings surrounding it. The night started normally enough. As pledges, we were instructed to arrive at 10 p.m. sharp and head straight to the basement. The stairwell leading down was poorly lit by a single flickering fluorescent tube, casting strange shadows on the graffiti-covered concrete walls. The air grew thicker and mustier with each step down. Looking back, I should have trusted my instincts when I first felt that suffocating dread. The basement was a mess of red Solo cups and empty beer bottles from previous parties. A single bare bulb swung gently overhead, creating moving shadows that seemed to dance across the floor. About 15 other pledges were already there, shifting nervously and making awkward small talk. The brothers hadn't arrived yet, but we could hear their muffled voices and footsteps from upstairs. When the brothers finally came down, their leader carried an ancient leather-bound book. They formed a circle around us, and the president, a senior named Marcus, began reading what he called their traditional initiation ritual. The words were in Latin, and although none of us understood them, something about the way he spoke made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. They split us into pairs and gave us our first task. Each duo had to explore a different section of the house and find a specific item. Jake and I were assigned to the third floor, where the brothers claimed no one had lived for decades due to structural concerns. The wooden staircase creaked under our weight as we ascended, our phone flashlights creating long shadows that stretched down the hallway. The third floor was like stepping into another century. Dust-covered sheets draped over antique furniture, and moonlight filtered through cracked windows. Our assignment was to find an old class ring supposedly lost by a brother in the 1960s. As we searched, Jake told me about rumors he'd heard, about pledges who had disappeared during initiation nights, their cases going cold and eventually being forgotten. We found something else instead, a brass key, ancient and ornate, lying on the floor near a dark stain that looked disturbingly like dried blood. When we picked it up, we heard a door slam somewhere in the house, followed by muffled screams that sounded more genuine than any hazing ritual should allow. The key led us to a hidden door behind a bookshelf, revealing a narrow staircase that descended into darkness. We should have turned back then, should have run from the house and called the police, but curiosity and the false courage of youth drove us forward. The stairs seemed to go down much further than physically possible, given the house's structure. What we found below defied explanation. A vast chamber, centuries older than the house itself, stretched out before us. Stone walls lined with ancient symbols surrounded a central altar, its surface stained dark brown. Scattered around were personal belongings, watches, wallets, cell phones, dating back decades, each item tagged with a pledge's name and date. On one wall, a corkboard displayed yellowed newspaper clippings and photographs. Missing person reports dating back to the 1950s, all young men, all university students. Some faces I recognized from the composite photos hanging in the fraternity's main hall, brothers who had supposedly graduated and moved away. The horrible truth began to dawn on us. These weren't just Halloween props or elaborate hazing decorations. A heavy metal door at the far end of the chamber bore deep scratch marks on its surface. As we approached, we heard movement from behind it, scratching, whimpering sounds that no human throat should make. The brass key fit perfectly in the lock. Jake reached for the handle, but I grabbed his arm. The sounds behind the door grew louder, more desperate. Before we could decide what to do, voices echoed from the stairwell. The brothers were coming down. We fled through a different corridor, following the dim red glow of an emergency exit sign. The passageway twisted and turned, eventually leading to a storm drain that opened into the woods behind campus. We ran until our lungs burned, not stopping until we reached the safety of our dorm room. We called the police that night, but by the time they arrived, The basement chamber had been sealed off. The brothers claimed ignorance, suggesting we had imagined everything in our drunken state. The police found no evidence of the room we described, and without proof, there was nothing they could do. The case was closed within weeks. Jake and I dropped out that semester. The nightmares were too much to handle. Sometimes I still see Marcus's face in the news. He's a successful businessman now, and Alpha Sigma Phi's chapter is still going strong. Every fall, new pledges file into that old Victorian mansion, unaware of what lies beneath. And every few years, another student vanishes without a trace, their disappearance eventually forgotten in the endless cycle of college life. I've spent years researching the fraternity's history since then. The pattern goes back centuries, to secret societies in medieval universities. The Latin words, the ritual, the underground chamber, they're all part of something darker and older than any of us realized. But no one believes my theories. After all, fraternities have always been about tradition, brotherhood, and secrets. Who would suspect that some secrets are kept in blood? I still drive past that house sometimes, late at night when the streets are empty. Through the windows, I catch glimpses of new pledges, laughing, drinking, unaware of the true price of brotherhood. And sometimes, when the wind blows just right, I swear I can hear those sounds again. Scratching, whimpering, pleading, carried up from deep below the earth where the darkness keeps its secrets. Beta Kappa Pi was different from other fraternities. While most Greek houses on campus were housed in aging buildings with peeling paint and creaky floors, BKP's residence was a modern architectural marvel, all clean lines, glass, and gleaming white surfaces. As a chemistry major with a perfect GPA, I was exactly the kind of pledge they wanted. They called themselves the Think Tank Fraternity, exclusively recruiting top students from STEM fields. Their basement laboratory was what sealed the deal for me. Unlike the beer-soaked party dungeons of other frats, BKP had a state-of-the-art research facility that would make any university jealous. The equipment alone must have cost millions. Gas chromatographs, mass spectrometers, electron microscopes. They told us it was funded by successful alumni in the pharmaceutical industry, eager to nurture the next generation of scientists. The security was intense. Every pledge had to sign multiple NDAs, and access to the lab required both a key card and fingerprint scan. The brothers said it was to protect their research intellectual property. We were assigned to small research teams, each working on different projects under the supervision of senior members. My team was tasked with studying the effects of certain chemical compounds on human cognitive enhancement. The first red flag appeared 3 weeks into our project. While analyzing some data late one night, I noticed patterns in the molecular structures that seemed familiar. These weren't new compounds. They were variants of infamous street drugs, slightly modified to create novel effects. When I mentioned this to my team leader, he dismissed my concerns with a practiced ease that felt rehearsed. The weekly dinner meetings were mandatory. We'd gather in the formal dining room, surrounded by portraits of distinguished alumni, discussing our research progress over expensive wines. The brothers took meticulous notes on tablets, measuring our contributions, our loyalty, our potential. Those who asked too many questions or showed signs of doubt would suddenly find themselves transferred to different projects or encouraged to deactivate their membership. I started doing my own research, staying late after others had left. The storage unit in the back of the lab held hundreds of labeled vials, each containing clear liquids with coded names. Cross-referencing the codes with the research databases revealed nothing. These substances weren't part of any official experiment, yet new batches appeared weekly. The truth began unraveling at the spring formal. Unlike other fraternities' wild parties, BKP's events were sophisticated affairs attended by wealthy alumni and their business associates. That night, I noticed something odd. Small drops of clear liquid being added to select guests' drinks by brothers wearing white gloves. The recipients would become unusually compliant, signing papers and making promises they likely wouldn't remember. Over the next few weeks, I pieced it together. BKP wasn't just a fraternity. It was the research and development arm of a sophisticated drug operation. They recruited brilliant students to develop new synthetic compounds, tested them at social events, and distributed them through their alumni network. The pharmaceutical companies were real, but they were fronts for something much darker. I found encrypted files detailing years of research, designer drugs engineered for specific effects, memory manipulation, increased suggestibility, behavior modification. The Cognitive Enhancement Project was just a cover for developing the next generation of pharmaceutical weapons. Some of the test subjects had been fellow students who attended their parties. Others were business competitors who mysteriously changed their minds about deals. When I tried to gather evidence, I discovered how thorough their security really was. Files deleted themselves when copied, photos became corrupted, and samples mysteriously disappeared. Several break-ins occurred at my apartment, though nothing was taken. The message was clear. They were watching, and they knew what I was doing. The cameras were everywhere, hidden in smoke detectors, light fixtures, even the frames of alumni portraits. They tracked every movement, every conversation, every keystroke. The brothers claimed it was for security, but the system was really designed to monitor the pledges, identifying potential threats before they could expose the operation. I finally understood the true scope during a late-night meeting I wasn't supposed to witness. The fraternity's advisory board, CEOs, politicians, judges, all gathered to discuss their investments. They weren't just selling drugs, they were selling influence. Their compounds were being used to manipulate decisions at the highest levels of business and government. I tried to go to the authorities, meeting an FBI agent in a parking garage late one night. 2 days later, his death was ruled a suicide. The investigating officers were all BKP alumni. The local news ran a small story, then quickly moved on to other matters. The fraternity's influence ran deeper than I'd imagined. Now I watch from a distance as their power grows. Every major headline carries their fingerprints: sudden policy reversals, unexpected corporate mergers, inexplicable changes in voting patterns. The brothers of Beta Kappa Pi are everywhere, their laboratory-created compounds reshaping the world one decision at a time. The fraternity's basement lab is still there, still producing new formulas for new purposes. Each semester, they recruit more brilliant minds, promising them access to cutting-edge research and guaranteed success. Most pledges never realize what they're really helping to create. Those who do either join the conspiracy or disappear into carefully constructed accidents and suicides. I graduated early and moved across the country, but I know they're still watching. Every job rejection, every loan denial, every suspicious car following me home reminds me of their reach. I've learned to live with it, carrying the weight of what I know. Sometimes I see their symbol, 2 Greek letters and a microscope, in the corner of a news broadcast or at the bottom of a corporate annual report, and I remember what lies behind those pristine white walls and sophisticated parties. Gamma Tau Omega wasn't your typical fraternity. Instead of beer pong and football games, their house was filled with the latest gaming rigs and VR setups. They called themselves the Digital Brotherhood, attracting computer science majors and esports enthusiasts. Their 3-story building had been completely renovated with fiber optic internet, smart home technology, and enough computing power to run a small tech company. The server room in their basement was what first caught my attention during rush week. Most fraternities kept their kegs there, but GTO had racks of custom-built machines humming away behind climate-controlled glass doors. The brothers said they used them for cryptocurrency mining and hosting gaming servers. The electrical bills alone must have been astronomical, but money never seemed to be an issue for them. As a sophomore majoring in cybersecurity, I was thrilled when they offered me a bid. My first assignment as a pledge was simple enough: help maintain their private gaming servers and internal network. Every brother had a custom mechanical keyboard with unique RGB lighting patterns, and they communicated almost exclusively through their own encrypted messaging system. Even in the house, most conversations happened through text. The monitoring station was impressive, an entire wall of screens showing network traffic, system metrics, and surveillance feeds from around campus. They claimed it was for testing network security protocols, but I noticed they kept particularly close tabs on certain buildings. The bursar's office, the registrar, the financial aid department. The brothers worked in shifts, someone always watching the data flow. The first sign that something was wrong came during midterms. A student from my computer ethics class had been asking too many questions about GTO's network infrastructure. One night, all of his devices were mysteriously bricked, his cloud accounts emptied, his digital life erased. He dropped out a week later. The brothers just smiled when I mentioned it, saying some people weren't cut out for the digital age. While running cable in the attic, I found a box of old student IDs and credit cards, hundreds of them going back years. In the corner, hard drives were stacked like bricks. When I checked the logs, I discovered they were filled with personal data, financial records, medical histories, private emails, all meticulously categorized. This wasn't just network security testing. They were collecting ammunition. The truth emerged piece by piece. Gamma Tau Omega wasn't just a fraternity, it was a sophisticated cybercrime operation. The cryptocurrency mining was real, but it was just a cover. Their real business was data harvesting and digital extortion. They had compromised the university's entire network, gathering dirt on everyone from students to administrators. The gaming servers hosted darknet markets where they sold information to the highest bidders. Each pledge class was carefully selected based on their technical skills and potential usefulness to the operation. They started us small, fixing network issues, managing servers, writing code. But as we proved ourselves, we were given access to more restricted systems. I discovered that every major academic or financial decision at the university went through their servers first. They knew everyone's secrets. The money was incredible. Bitcoin wallets fat with ransomware payments, offshore accounts swelling with blackmail money. They had perfected a system of digital extortion that was nearly impossible to trace. When someone refused to pay, embarrassing emails would leak, private photos would surface, grades would change, loans would default. Lives could be destroyed with a few keystrokes. The university administration was either oblivious or complicit. Every investigation into network security breaches was quietly closed. IT staff who asked questions found themselves facing digital harassment until they quit. Several of the brothers had work-study jobs in the tech support department, giving them physical access to critical systems. The perfect insider threat. When I tried to distance myself from their activities, I learned how thorough their control was. They had everything, my entire digital footprint laid bare. Passwords, search history, private messages, financial data. They even had keylogger data from before I pledged, proving they'd been watching potential recruits for months. The message was clear. There was no walking away from the digital brotherhood. I tried to gather evidence, copying files to encrypted drives, taking screenshots of their operations. But they had rootkits installed on everything, monitoring every file transfer, every keystroke. My attempts to document their crimes were deleted as fast as I could create them. Each failure came with a warning: corrupted files on my laptop, frozen bank accounts, changed grades. The tunnels beneath the university were their physical network hub, where they tapped into the main data lines. Down there, among the heating pipes and electrical conduits, they had built a secondary infrastructure. Miles of fiber optic cable connected to hidden servers, giving them unfettered access to the digital arteries of the campus. It was their kill switch. If anyone threatened them, they could shut down the entire university. They've gone beyond the university now. Through alumni connections, they've infiltrated tech companies, financial institutions, government agencies. Those custom keyboards, hardware keyloggers smuggled into corporate offices by graduates. The surveillance system, now monitoring smart home devices across the country. Their network grows with each new pledge class, spreading like a digital virus through the infrastructure of society. I graduate next month, already promised a job at a major tech firm, their choice, not mine. My GTO brothers made sure my resume was perfect, my interviews flawless. They own my future like they own my past. Sometimes late at night, I see the pledges in the glow of their monitors, learning the tools of digital extortion, becoming part of the machine. The fraternity's motto rings in my head: information is power, brotherhood is forever. In the digital age, they control both.